Hello, welcome to the Bears discussion. Live, uncut, just raw. I just wanted to talk to you about what we've seen with the post-fight analysis of Vitaly Klitschko, Lennox Lewis. As I stated in the video, we've seen them get together in the center of the ring. As I knew as a fan going into this fight, I had said this fight's going to be determined in the range battle. It was unfortunate to see this fight determined on a fluke cut, but as it was, I think I'm a big fan of Lennox Lewis. I wrote Lennox Lewis an email after this fight talking about, I said, Champ. I went to his website. I said, Champ, you need to fight this guy again. He gave you a great fight, a great challenge. You've been the best in the world, and now it's time we got to see this again. And of course, I didn't expect any response, but I was a big fan of Lennox Lewis at that time, and I still am a big fan of Lennox Lewis, and I'll always like Lennox Lewis. But that said, I'm not going to sit here and call Lennox Lewis the GOAT, even though me personally, I think the GOAT comes down to the best super heavyweights of all time, and that's Lennox Lewis and the Klitschkos. So what I'm gonna say is, what I saw Vitaly Klitschko master the range, hold mastery over the range for the duration of the fight, and from here I saw Vitaly Klitschko tee off on Lennox Lewis and score the CompuBox numbers, the best power shots, the most punches of the fight, everything, the combos, everything. And with this range came footwork. I saw Lennox Lewis try to close the gap and try to work from the inside. I saw him holding the back of the head like this, like Lennox Lewis does. That's his signature move. He even knocked a guy out, pushing a guy's head into an uppercut, and he knocked him out that way. I do think the ref should have said something more about the holding and hitting, especially midway through the fight. It was 4th or 5th round where Lennox Lewis was holding Vitaly Klitschko in that same manner and punching his side. It's not okay to do. George Foreman points it out in the calling of the fight. So being a big fan of Lennox, watching Lennox, I watched him knock out all kinds of guys beautifully, and just beautiful. Lennox Lewis was a great fighter, and a guy who fought off his range and height. He also established his jab often, and was known for throwing 30-some jabs around. In this fight, he didn't throw hardly any jabs in any of the rounds. Lennox Lewis was forced to go to a place he had never been before in all of his career, and that was simply because of Vitaly Klitschko's mastery of the reach. Now, this would have happened at any point had they fought at any time, or whatever shape Lennox Lewis came in or was in, because in the first few rounds, they're both fresh. You can't really talk about the fatigue aspect detracting from Lennox Lewis's condition or shape. And also, before the fight, Stewart and Lewis and the Lewis camp said, we're in great shape. We don't need all kinds of time or people to prepare for Vitaly Klitschko. We don't see any talent in Vitaly Klitschko, and we'll knock Vitaly Klitschko out. Well, they didn't knock Vitaly Klitschko out. The fight was stopped in a cut, which was a manageable cut. The cut wasn't bleeding. Joe Souza, legendary Hall of Fame cut man, and Al Gavin were the ones working the corners. And Joe Souza was the one working the corner for Vitaly Klitschko. Joe Souza in the post-fight interview said he had the cut under control, which he did. We all saw, and in all actuality, the fight should have gone on at least another round or two if they were going to stop it. They should have been warned that they were contemplating stopping the fight on a manageable cut, on a cut. Now, I'm not going to say the cut wasn't severe. The cut was one of the most severe ones I've ever seen. But I will say that Vitaly Klitschko knows his body. I know my body. I assume you guys know your body. And Vitaly Klitschko knew he couldn't go on with his torn rotator cuff against Chris Bird. So are we going to say that Vitaly Klitschko couldn't gauge the severity of the wound on his face? He obviously felt he could fight through the wound, and he did fight through the wound. He fought valiantly through the wound and, in fact, increased his lead. The judges gave 2 rounds to Lennox Lewis, but watching the fight, do you really give those rounds to Lennox Lewis? Because he landed some... Now, they were badass uppercuts, which didn't wobble or face Vitaly Klitschko, but they were badass uppercuts. But in those same rounds, Lennox Lewis was outpointed. In those same rounds, Vitaly Klitschko's scoring combos, all kinds of shots, and even in that fight, Vitaly Klitschko's having to push Lennox Lewis away on multiple times because of Lennox Lewis's aversion to clinch, and try to close the gap. So for all these reasons, Lennox Lewis having to turn to something he wasn't, because he had never been in a fight like this in his life. Somebody who was going to master the range on him, take his jab out of the equation. I give the nod to Vitaly Klitschko. Yes, I'm cognizant of the fact that the fight was given to Lennox Lewis on a cut because the doctor stopped it, but I saw how the cut happened in the beginning of the third round, where Lennox Lewis had never peppered Vitaly Klitschko with any significant shots. Thus far in the fight, Vitaly Klitschko wasn't softened up. He wasn't anything. You look at the left side of Vitaly Klitschko's face at the end of round 2, and you can see there's no problems. There's nothing going on, and then all of a sudden there's this fluke cut. So me as a fan, I gotta look at rounds boxed. I gotta dissect rounds boxed, and what's happening there in every aspect, from range, ring generalship, aggression, handwork, footwork, and everything. And to me, most all the aspects of this fight, all the way through, were won by Vitaly Klitschko. Now, if you want to give a guy a greatness nod, or say he's got a feather in his cap because he won on a cut, I don't share your views. I know many in MMA, many in the boxing world don't share the views that a cut is really relevant in anything. If you're not the guy just beating the other guy down and then caused the cut because you've softened up all kinds of tissue. You basically made pulverized hamburger out of a guy and then peeled the wrapper back. Well, that's not what happened in this Vitaly Klitschko fight. It was a fluke. And even in MMA, in the MMA world, when they went on a cut, the two fighters are in the ring, they basically apologize and say, look, I know this isn't any barometer of who the better fighter is. I'll rematch you anytime, and it's almost a sense of honor with them guys. And that's the way I view it too. A laceration isn't anything. Like I said in the video, it's not a broken bone, it's not a broken nose, a broken rib, a knockout blow that knocks your equilibrium out. It's none of these things. It's a fluke, and it's something that Vitaly Klitschko could clearly fight through, and he could see it was manageable, and he knows his own body. So, I gotta say, I'm not gonna give Lennox Lewis the nod on the greatness barometer over Vitaly Klitschko because of a cut. I'm gonna look at rounds boxed, and after I look at rounds boxed, I, as a fan, notice objectively, Lennox Lewis got smoked. Lennox Lewis got absolutely smoked and dominated. And at the same token, Lennox Lewis is one of my favorites of greats who landed some big shots in that fight. But in all seriousness, after watching that fight, how can you not say Vitaly Klitschko is the man? Whether or not they had met in their primes or not, the fact that Vitaly Klitschko has a granite jaw, that he only has ever lost on injuries in fights that he was overwhelmingly winning, many aspects, if not all aspects of the fight, how am I objectively not going to put my money on Vitaly Klitschko? I'm not. I'm going to put my money on Vitaly Klitschko. I'm going to say Vitaly Klitschko is better, and I'm going to say it would have been more to Lewis's credit to give a rematch unless he was absolutely certain in his own mind he was going to be defeated. That's where this fan stands, and I'm anxious to hear your feedback. Thanks for watching with Bears.